Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially the NFL offseason. So you guys already know what time that means. It is officially NFL mock draft season. It is officially mock draft season, and us as Steel Twins are here to give you our first official Pittsburgh Steelers 2023 full mock draft. Pre-free agency, of course. And before we get into that, man, got to throw out a couple things. Definitely follow us on Twitter at SteelTwins. Check out SteelYunders.com. And the first episode of the Steeler Culture Podcast is coming this week on Spotify, featuring us as Steel Twins and Justin Onstadt, a.k.a. Cold Steel of SteelYunders.com. Definitely check it out and look forward to that. Otherwise, let's get into our first mock draft. And we got a special guest joining us for our first mock draft. None other than Steel Sentinel. He's joined us the past couple years for mock drafts, and he's doing it again this time around. Let's get him in here. Steel Sentinel, glad you're joining us. How you doing, man?
It is good to be back, gentlemen. Hello, Pittsburgh Steelers Nation. We are in the midst of one of the most exciting parts of the season, the off season, leading up into the new year. And before we know it, hopefully we get some football back on TV again. But it's great to be back. We've been doing this for so long, it feels like. It's been awesome to constantly come back and see the growth of the channel and just see the growth in one another and the chats that we get to have before the show starts and everything. So it's always great to be back. Excited to talk about some Steelers football.
Couldn't agree more, man. Well said. Glad to have you back on for another year, for another mock draft, our first of the offseason. Obviously, this is pre-free agency, so some picks are going to be ahead of others. And we obviously have our own mindsets for our first mock and our own direction, which is good. It's good to share mocks and split opinions and just go different directions. Now, I noticed with your mock and our mock, it has a similar ending, but a much different start. So this should be interesting. But let's get into the mocks, man. The first pick, the 17th pick for our mock, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Broderick Jones, offensive tackle out of Georgia, man. We could not stress enough throughout the offseason, the Steelers need a franchise left tackle. I am not sold on Dan Moore. I am not holding on to extra hope or any hope that is left. I know he's coming into his third year, and the O-line did a little better at the second half of the season, but I'm not holding on to that, man. We need a franchise left tackle, and Broderick Jones is one of the few guys in the early rounds that has that caliber player in him, man. Broderick Jones is just... He's strong. He's a freak. He comes from Georgia. You know, the Steelers, they obviously drafted Pickens last year. They were looking at Jones, I'm sure, during the film process, the studying of Pickens as well. So he's going to be on their radar. And once the Georgia Pro Day comes around, I have no doubt in my mind they're going to be all hands on deck at that Pro Day. So I think he's definitely going to be on the Steelers' radar. And he could be one of the guys that falls at 17, man. And if he is, he's just one of those guys you can't say no because he has that franchise left tackle, 15-year starter caliber type of style in him, man.
Yeah, without a doubt. He's got the size. He's got the strength in him. He's a great pass protector. He's a good run blocker. He did great blocking for Bennett and helping out that Georgia Bulldogs offense, being two-time straight national champions in college. Mm-hmm. He's a great left tackle. He'd be a massive upgrade over Dan Moore and a true definition of franchise left tackle, in my opinion.
Couldn't agree more. And I will say his pass blocking could be a little better for my liking. There's certain guys I like a little more than Jones, but the reason we selected him is because certain guys might not be there. Obviously, that's all speculation. Draft day is a lot more different than anything could ever imagine. But I think with proper coaching, which I think we can agree our O-line coach is here to stay, which is good for the guys and good for the team. I think with proper development, this guy could be a surefire Pro Bowler for years to come. Yeah. But Sentinel, man, let's get into your mock. Who's your first round pick?
Absolutely. So to kind of give everybody listening some context about how I'm going to be doing it this year round, I think I speak for all of us right now and all Steelers Nation listening to this right now that free agency is what sets up the draft. Yeah, the Steelers are really good in that the fact they don't want to go into the draft with a million positions of need, because then you're going to end up taking a player who maybe isn't the best one on the board at the time, and you have to reach, and then it becomes a big issue. Case in point, somebody like Artie Burns. They were desperate for a cornerback. They reached at a guy that they didn't really want, and let's just say he's not on the team for more than one reason any longer. So to kind of give you a context of where I'll be going with this draft, I'll be telling you why I pick certain positions along with other positions in free agency I think they're going to address. I 100% agree with everything you said on Broderick Jones. I think he's just an absolute phenom, talented young stud. I think he just plays with that edge. He passes what I call the Steelers' eye test. He just plays with that oomph. He's a nasty guy that, if Kenny takes a hit a little bit late after the whistle, Broderick Jones is going to get up in your face, and I don't want somebody like that up in my face. I don't know about you guys. But I do think that the offensive line is probably going to be addressed to some degree in free agency, similar to what happened last year. They brought in James Daniels. They went ahead and they re-signed Chukwuma Okorafor. I think that something similar could happen. I do find it interesting that a lot of the tackles that they've been looking at thus far, even though it's been pretty early, have been right tackles. I don't know if you've noticed that. Darnell Wright's a right tackle. DeJuan Jones is a left tackle. Matthew Bergeron's a right tackle. So I actually could see a world in which maybe they move Chooks to left. He's more of that passing guy, that pass blocker anyways. He started as a left tackle for the Steelers. They just recently moved him back to right tackle. So I am predicting that Chooks is gonna move to left. I think that they're maybe going to bring in a guy like Ben Powers from the Ravens, who's still young. The Ravens are going to have to pay God only knows however much money to Lamar if they keep him, let alone all the money they just forked over for Roquan Smith. So Ben Powers is somebody I'm looking at them targeting to bring in, similar to James Daniels. Mm-hmm. So I'm not personally predicting any kind of offensive movement in the first round. I think that there's a world in which all three top tackles are gone by 17. There's always the chance that one of them falls. That's just how the draft plays out. But I think a sneaky position that a lot of Steelers fans, maybe yourselves included, are going to jump at me down at. I think a position that needs to be addressed early and often is the wide receiver room. And here's the reason why, right? You know what you have in George Pickens, and it's only going to get better from there. But he's still only a second-year player. So, what happens if he has a down year? Okay, so then you have Deontay Johnson, who had 0 touchdowns last year. A lot of that was because of the offensive play calling, which was garbage. The kind of quarterback inconsistencies because Mitchell Trubisky is, Mitchell Trubisky, and because Pickett was a rookie. Okay, well, then you have Calvin Austin III. I think he's a player that a lot of Steelers fans are very excited about, but also we need to pump the brakes a little bit. Yeah, he hasn't even played one preseason game. We don't know what he's going to do. So he's an unproven. He redshirted last year, essentially. So you have an unproven Calvin Austin III, inconsistent Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, who's still really, really young, although he has a lot of upside, and then the rest of your wide receiver core, special teams guys who provide depth. Steven Sims, special teams in depth. Miles Boykin, free agent, special teams in depth. Gunnar Olszewski, special teams in depth, so on and so forth. Even Anthony Miller, another unproven guy we haven't seen play once in the black and gold because of injury. So it would be the most Steeler move ever in a year when they need cornerback, when they need tackle, and a bunch of other needs, that they take the best player available at this position. Bear with me. I know you two are about to jump out of your seats. In round 1, I have the Steelers taking Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of Pitt. First and foremost, he's from Pitt, and also to USC. And here's my reasoning why. He's going to bring you similar competition and similar statistics to what a Deontay Johnson is. If you're looking for someone to replace a Deontay Johnson, it's going to be Jordan Addison, number 1. Number 2, they're both really good route runners who can play both outside and inside, and the Steelers have been watching him for 2 years now. If there's anybody out of that Pitt locker room that they've seen day in and day out that they're going to take, it's going to be a Pitt player. Think about Kenny Pickett, right? We were all in the Malik Willis train, and then Kenny Pickett came out of left field because they took all that time that they saw him in the building, not for granted, and they really liked what he had to offer. And I can guarantee you in that exit interview that Kenny Pickett had when he said, hey, I want Matt Canada, he definitely was probably talking about how he wants his buddy Jordan Addison in there. And if they kept Matt Canada around for Kenny Pickett, I could see them trying to get somebody like Jordan Addison in because of Kenny Pickett.
So then when you get a guy like Jordan out the gate as a freshman, it took one throw in a throwing session, and I pulled him aside. I was like, make sure you line up with me every time in the throwing session. I was like, I'll wait for you at the end because he's a freshman. Yeah. The upperclassmen want to go first. I was like, I'll wait for you at the end. I knew he was going to play, and Whip told me, he's like, this kid's really good. So to watch him grow from that 2020 season, which was a COVID year, that's the kid's first year, the COVID year. Yeah. It's tough to like have a freshman learn all that stuff. So I was so happy to come back and work with him for another year, and like just dedicated as I am. So like never missed a throwing session, never missed a film session, always where I needed him to be. And like there's a reason why I always looked his way, man. The kid, I could trust him, and he's a great player. So it was a really good relationship that we had. And to say the least, I'll be banging, slamming the table for him to get drafted wherever I go.
He had his best year all in college football ever with Kenny Pickett. He had 1,500 plus yards in one season, the season he was with Kenny Pickett. So I'm not saying that it's the most important position. I'm not even saying that he's the best wide receiver in the draft, because in my opinion, he's not. But it, to me, seems like the one that would make the most sense if you're trying to build around Kenny Pickett, if you're trying to trade Deontay and gain other picks. You would have to then bring in somebody immediately to fill in his position. And I think the fact that he had no touchdowns last year, although he had a bad coordinator and although he had quarterback controversy, other players like Pickens, who was a rookie, was able to do it. Other players who were pretty much insignificant all season, like Connor Olszewski and Connor Hayward, were able to do it. So I'm just saying I had higher hopes for Deontay Johnson. I was kind of let down, and I'm kind of tired of the attitude that he brings. Whenever you see him on the camera on the NFL, it's either him being disgusted because he dropped the ball or he just had a shitty play, or he, for whatever reasons, is like super hyped and jazzed up because he got a pass for like the first time after like four targets. So I'm kind of done with the Deontay Johnson journey. I wish him nothing but the best, but I think it's time to get some new blood into the Steelers.
I will say this. I agree with everything you said about Deontay specifically. And you could say this about literally anybody in the offense. I mean, they're all kind of handicapped because of the coordinator and the way Matt Canada schemes the passing game. And I don't have any extra belief or trust that he's going to improve. I could be wrong. All I hope is to be wrong. So drafting Addison for that reason alone is a little. I would just say I don't trust Canada to work Addison and Kenny together the way that we know they can, because obviously that chemistry will always be there. Very similar to Burrow and Chase. My argument is I don't think we can trade Deontay because the Steelers pretty much trapped themselves in his contract. If the Steelers were to trade Deontay, they would suffer over $19 million in dead cap, and in an offseason where they would have to make moves, like you said, like a Ben Powers, which off camera Rob has been saying he would really love him from the Ravens. Moving Chucks to left tackle is very possible because he can be that swing guy at any position. So for those reasons, the way you planned it out is actually pretty favorable in my book, because I'm not one in selecting Addison for the reasons of picking O-line or prioritizing O-line or not even thinking receiver is a necessity. But for the reasons you said, I honestly can't dislike it. The way you planned it out, I'm a little more favorable to it. And if that were to go down, depending on what happens in free agency, the possibility of drafting Addison could very well be warming to me.
It could very well be more open. It really depends on what the Steelers do as far as making cap and signing guys in free agency, as well as re-signing guys to the team right now.
Right.
It really depends what they do. And Addison at wide receiver, it's a move I can see the Steelers absolutely doing because, one, Kenny wants it, and two, you did mention the wide receiver room is pretty bare outside, the main three guys. It's pretty bare. You look at that number 4 wide receiver, it's quite unknown. It's quite a mystery at the moment.
Or even that number 3.
Yeah, because Austin is still unproven. A lot of potential, but still unproven. Addison could come in there as a familiar name, as a familiar face for Pickett, play in there, and you can have Addison and Deontay on the same team, and depending on what Addison does in his rookie year, if he were to become a Steeler, there's that flexibility, that option to trade Deontay if you wanted to. That way it's less dead cap space next season, get an extra pick or an extra player out of it, and trade Deontay and go with Pickens and Addison there.
That would be a little more favorable from a year from now if that were to be the case for cap reasons. I will say you definitely need a strong passing attack to succeed in the NFL nowadays. So drafting Addison and getting that chemistry going with Kenny again would absolutely boost the passing game and boost the production of Kenny. But my argument again is still trading, because your mock is based on trading Deontay, correct?
Correct. So I didn't really get to elaborate on this because I got so carried away with myself here. But I do think a team like the Detroit Lions, which is what I went ahead and I simulated here, I think a team like that who has a lot of money, who's desperate to take that next step, who's on the up and up, they're not some garbage team. They're a team that's showing improvement, similar coaching style to what Mike Tomlin does. They have a defensive coach, very passionate player, a very passionate head coach. I think it could happen. Again, nothing is for certain, but I think if you're able to pretty much get a first-round pick out of Chase Claypool, I think that you could get an extra second from the Lions for Deontay, because they have tons of seconds, they have tons of picks, tons of money. I think that they would want to match up Amon-Ra St. Brown with like a high ceiling number 2, which is how I look at Deontay Johnson. I see Deontay as a high ceiling number 2, and Amon-Ra is like a low number 1, and putting those two on the field together with that incredibly explosive offense that they built last year, I think could be something that could happen realistically without thinking that we're going to get a million picks for Deontay Johnson.
Right. But again, my argument is I think they trapped themselves in his contract, and the dead cap we would suffer, I just don't see it as a likely option. But that doesn't mean that eliminates the factor of drafting Addison, because I can absolutely see him being a top option on the Steelers draft board, because obviously the Kenny connection, they've watched Addison as long as they've watched Kenny, so there's no doubt he's going to be on their radar. But for the reasons you explained it, what they do in free agency, what could happen, it's a little more favorable in my book.
Yeah.
But I still think they should prioritize O-line, but the way you planned it out, I can't exactly hate it, but the rest of your mock looks really good, man. So, honestly, this is why we share mocks, to bring extra discussion, to share it out, to give extra viewpoints or different viewpoints, because this is what the NFL offseason is all about. This is what Steelers mock drafts are all about, man. Steelers Nation, a lot of Steelers Nation can have different viewpoints, so it's good to break it down like that.
I couldn't agree more. It's all about just listening to one another's opinions, and no one's ever 100% right. If we were 100% right, we would be in the draft room with the Steelers, right?
Yes.
So it's just about hearing other people's opinions, building up the community, and at the end of the day, just hoping that our boys get some dogs out there on the field.
Absolutely. And that's kind of how the rest of our mock goes, man. And not to say Addison isn't a dog, because he is. He's a phenomenal receiver.
Yeah.
The way to me with Addison, as of right now, my viewpoint could very well change after free agency, depending on what the Steelers do. But my viewpoint on drafting Addison right now will be very similar to Najee. Love the player, love the guy. He's phenomenal. He's going to have a successful NFL career. But, man, you just got to prioritize certain positions over others. But that don't mean I'm going to not think about drafting Addison. So
No.
We'll see. Well, time will definitely tell. So will this pick, man. I hope the Steelers sign a guard or someone interior to replace Dotson, or even left tackle, like you said. Maybe move Chucks to left, fix up offensive guard, and you pretty much have your O-line set to go. I mean, who you would have a right tackle would be the Steelers to select, because you did mention they're really scouting a lot of the right tackles, specifically DeJuan Jones, Darnell Wright, a lot of those guys, right? Mm-hmm. But for this mock, man, again, this is pre-free agency. I would hope they fill this gap in free agency, but for now, we're going to continue to focus on the trenches. With the 32nd pick we got for the Bears, thank you, Chase, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Osiris Torrance, offensive guard out of Florida, man. This guy's a dog. This guy is a mauler. This is someone we need at left guard. He primarily played right guard his last 2 years, but played left guard in his first. He even said he's open to playing either spot. So
yeah,
we could swing him to left guard, put him right beside Cole, and then Jones right at left tackle. And then right there, you got two maulers, two dogs right on the left side, which is, it really needs to be fixed. And I think you got good pass protection. You got a great run scheme you could focus on and trust on that left side. And you got two young guys, man, and rookie contracts that are just going to be the future of your O-line to protect Kenny. And, man, you got to strike with Kenny while he's still in his rookie contract. I mean, look at other teams around the NFL. So I think the way to do it is O-line, and prioritizing in the first two picks is something the Steelers should definitely focus on, unless they fix it in the draft. But Torrance, man, is just That's a big boy.
Yeah, I feel like Torrance is a guy that I think all of us thought that Dotson was going to be. After his rookie season, Kevin Dotson looked really good, and very small reps. He looked outstanding. He looked, honestly, the best offensive lineman during that season. But then when it came to him being a full-time starter, granted, the offensive line coaches, with that situation, going from one coach to another, that didn't really help a lot in his progression and his development.
Nor did for many guys, but if I must say.
But Dotson never really reached that full potential, that high ceiling that we all thought he did. Torrance, I feel like, is a guy that Dotson should already be. And I feel like Torrance can be a guy that can replace Dotson, that can be a starter day one, in my honest opinion. Now in Florida, he was more of a right guard. I think he played a lot of his reps at right guard. Mm-hmm. But I did see in the Senior Bowl he was doing some reps at left guard, and he looked outstanding at that position too. So he has that flexibility to go to left and play that position full time.
Right, which I think would be the plan for the Steelers if they do select this guy. He's one of the best interior linemen in the draft. I could see this guy sneaking up into the first.
I absolutely can as well.
If not, man, him at 32 would be a hell of a steal in my book. But for your second-round pick, which you have 3 of them, we have 2, obviously. But for your first one, man, I love the dog you selected here.
He is honestly my favorite player in the draft. Hands down, he is like my favorite person in the entire draft. And I'll be honest with you, he wasn't at first. Not even in his position was he my favorite. So I think linebacker is a position that is very, very weak right now. You have Devin Bush, who I think they're just going to part ways with. He'll probably go somewhere else. I just don't think it ever panned out the way they wanted to. I think they just need to put their tail in between their legs and let him ride off into the sunset with another team. Robert Spillane is a free agent, and I think someone that they value. I think they're going to bring him back, but let's be honest, who's calling up and asking about Robert Spillane from other organizations? Probably not a lot of people. He definitely has some limitations, but he definitely has a role on this defense. We saw last year he was very much the run-stuffing middle linebacker, the old school middle linebacker that the Steelers enjoy. And then you have, of course, Mark Robinson, who's the rookie. He's not going anywhere. He got some playing time last year, but he's still pretty unproven. He only played in like 2 games. And then Myles Jack. Now, I'm going to say right on film, mark the tape right now, I think all this talk about cutting Myles Jack is silly. In everything I just told you, how thin at the position we are, why would you cut a guy like Myles Jack completely instead of restructuring him just because he hasn't made any quote-unquote splash plays? Myles Jack has never been the splash play linebacker. He's always been the quiet tackler, very athletic, very smart. Yeah, he had a pick every now and then in Jacksonville, but that was never his role. So to now go out and say, oh, we need to cut Jack because he didn't make plays and he's a huge cap casualty, I think is silly, because then if you do that, you need to have middle linebacker be your first round pick, and I think that there are way other bigger needs in the first round than linebacker. That being aside, there is a player that I really, really enjoy. His name's Drew Sanders, linebacker out of Alabama, Roll Tide, and Arkansas. And this guy, to me, you're going to think I'm crazy when I say this, it's like watching TJ Watt as a middle linebacker. And no, it's not just because
you're not crazy. What? You're not crazy, dude. I was literally thinking the same thing when I was watching this guy's film. I'm like, is that TJ at inside?
And let me explain to you why I think him at 32 would be the biggest luxury pick. Pick 32 is like the best pick in the whole draft because it is such a high value pick. You could do anything with this. Steelers could use this pick to trade up. They could use this pick to trade down. They could do anything with this pick. It's like the wild card in Uno. You can do anything. I think that sitting at 6'5", around 230, he's not the biggest guy, but let's be honest, these big hulking linebackers anymore aren't really the way the NFL is moving. They're looking for more of these roaming guys that can play kind of this hybrid coverage, blitzing type position. Drew Sanders, like I said, he's 6'5". He plays with such tenacity for someone his size and height. He will tackle you into the dirt. Like this. If you watch film on this, anybody listening to this podcast who has no idea about Drew Sanders or judged him prematurely like I did, I'll call myself out here, watch the tape. You will not find him not near the ball at all times. He finds the ball every single time, and that's as a middle linebacker. His outside linebacking skills are just as good. He got 10 sacks this last year as an outside linebacker.
This guy's a jack of all trades, man.
It's ridiculous. Do I think he replicates that at the NFL level? Probably not, because he's going to have to go against some pretty beefy tackles, but it adds variety to that defense. He's Micah Parsons-esque in the way that he could play inside and outside. Parsons is a little stockier. He kind of has that James Harrison build. He's just like a wrecking ball. But Drew Sanders is like a sledgehammer. He's going to play immediately at the linebacking position in the middle, and he's going to also play outside. And that kind of gives you some flexibility of not needing to draft outside linebacker depth too, because he can play both. You can play him at either position. You can give TJ some rest while Drew Sanders is out there and then bring in Spillane and Jack. Or you can have Drew Sanders in the middle with Jack. You can do anything with this kid. I really, really do think he has a lot of upside, and I wasn't big on him at first just because he's not Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell's another guy I really, really like. But when you look at Robert Spillane, he's essentially a Jack Campbell type guy, but he's a little bit not as athletic as Jack Campbell, and he's obviously older. But I do think that they just value Spillane too much. They have a huge crush on this guy. So to bring in somebody who does the same exact thing with the same exact skill set, I think is a little bit silly. So bring in a guy who's going to bring in something you hoped to have in Devin Bush, and that's a sideline-to-sideline guy who can tackle well, who can blitz really well, and who can provide you some flexibility at outside and inside.
Yeah, I love the Sanders pick entirely, dude. The dude is a beast. The dude plays like a Steeler. You watch this guy's film, you're like, that's a Pittsburgh motherfucking Steeler. Excuse my French, but this guy can play, man. He is absolutely one of our biggest draft crushes. Everything you said about him, could not agree more. The TJ Watt comparison, could not agree more. He brings off that vibe, man. Like, this guy can go.
Yeah, without a doubt. The guy's run-stopping ability is outstanding. His coverage skills are very, very good, too. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he was a safety at first before converting to linebacker, and you see the progression he is at linebacker for Arkansas. And he's just an outstanding player, one of the top linebackers in this year's draft. If you were to become a Steeler, you use that versatility, you use that flexibility to fix the linebacker position, to get your guy finally at linebacker, since we haven't been able to find the guy at inside since Shazier's unfortunate injury and departure. Like, Drew Sanders would be an absolute dog in the middle of the field.
The 49th pick in our mock, man. Going to keep going with the trenches. Going to keep that trend going, man. Now, we really valued, we really eyed a lot of guys at this position. And it's very stacked. You could find a gem at any position or any round for this position. With the 49th pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Mozzie Smith, defensive tackle out of Michigan. Now, I know he had a little off-field issue. He had a little bit of a gun charge a couple months ago, but this guy can go. This guy is a gap filler. This guy is strong. He is one of the best at his position when it comes to stopping the run, which is a serious concern when it comes to the interior defensive line.
Yeah.
As well as pass rush, but he even has upside there as well. But primarily, man, this guy he could fit in between Hayward and Ogunjobi, or Hayward and Leal, or Hayward and whoever, or he can just be opposite Hayward, man. This guy's just a pure interior gap filler, which is what we really need. He's strong. He's physical. He makes linemen look silly. He can take on double teams, which could really help with certain blitz packages. It could help other guys on the defense. I mean, this guy's what we need at the interior defensive line, man.
Yeah, without a doubt. A big body, a big guy, a guy that is not easy to block, a guy that you mentioned can take on double teams and can even mess up some of the run styles that the offense is going to try to do. Screw up their run, screw up their plays, and just get a guy in there to stop the run, tackle for loss, do whatever you got to do to stop the run, because that has been a big issue for the Steelers for many, many years now.
Yeah, so we keep on with the fixing the trenches here. Hopefully, now, again, this is before free agency starts. I'm hoping a lot of this is filled in free agency. Steelers are going to have to do a lot of moves before signing anybody. Cuts, restructures, all that stuff is all going to be inevitable very shortly as free agency creeps up. But for now, we're going to continue to work on the trenches. Another position that is definitely going to have to be filled is corner, which I believe is your next pick, correct?
Absolutely. So, interestingly enough, for the both of our mocks right now, we don't have cornerback up at the top. Now, I do think it'd be wonderful in the first round to get somebody like Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon, who's another one of my favorite guys in the draft. But Those players are going to be so highly taught after that you're not going to see them fall to 17. And if they do, I don't have a doubt in my mind that the Steelers will jump onto one of them. But I don't think that outside of those 4 cornerbacks, them being Cam Smith, Joey Porter Jr., Christian Gonzalez, and Devin Witherspoon in no particular order. After those 4, there's not anybody where I'm like, ooh, I need to take a reach at them in the first round. So there's a player that we're going to take in the second round here. His name's Emmanuel Forbes. And the way I look at Forbes is this, and you're never going to be able to unsee this. He's Marcus Peters. He's 100% Marcus Peters. He is that guy that is going to take it to the house when he gets his hands on the ball. This guy broke the SEC record for most return in pick sixes in a season. He intercepted 6 passes this past season, 3 of those for touchdown. One of those touchdowns was 82 long. 82-yard pick 6 is crazy. It's like Minka Fitzpatrick crazy. Now, the reason I say he's kind of Marcus Peters is that when Emmanuel Forbes is on. He's electric. He is unstoppable. But when he's off, you kind of forget about him. And he doesn't seem very much like the Steelers type of pick. The Steelers don't take flashy guys like this. And it's because he is that boomer bust prospect when he's on the field. Now, the reason I say that we would take him in the second, even though I just said everything I just did, is because if the Steelers are about to pay Cam Sutton what we think and hope they are, I can't see them then immediately coming back around and taking a cornerback. I think they're going to have Sutton be this outside-inside guy. I think Levi Wallace has done a very good job of being that high-end number 2. But I think they still need that electricity. I think they need that pick machine to make their secondary even better. And I think that's where Forbes comes into play. He would come in, he would start, but he wouldn't need to go against guys like Jamar Chase right away. Because Forbes isn't going to be your guy who's going to be your super sticky corner that just shuts everybody down. Forbes is going to be that guy that's going to anticipate the ball, hopefully hits it, gets the ball, and runs it for an interception. Now, I don't really know if that fits in the Steelers' mold currently. We'll have to see. I think having somebody like Ike Taylor in the scouting room is definitely going to help the Steelers scout a cornerback prospect. I've been back and forth on Forbes, but I think his upside is better than his ceiling, to me, is better than his floor.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Forbes has the talent to be one of the better ones out of this draft class, and it's a very stacked corner class, may I add. Very stacked, but even though Forbes, his frame might be a little questionable, 6'1", 180, might be a little skinny and bare bone for his size and for his role, but you cannot deny, man. Think of him how you want. Think of his highs and lows. This guy has phenomenal ball skills. And honestly, adding him to a secondary that was just first in interceptions would be, honestly, a hell of an add. Mm-hmm. So I like the Forbes pick a lot. I really like Forbes as a player a lot. So I think he's physical. He can work in the run. And obviously, he's a ball hawk. His ball skills are just out of this world for the type of player he is. So Forbes, man, I think it's good value for him at 49 for you. So Forbes, man, adding him to the secondary, man, and filling corner pretty at a decent spot where it's still very stacked. It's a good option.
And then with the third second pick, so in this world we're pretending Deontay Johnson got traded. So I can see a late second round, borderline third round pick being compensation necessary enough to trade him. Whether or not he does that is a different discussion, but we're having some fun here. So let's just play along here. Mm-hmm. I think that, like we both said, it looks like they're really targeting right tackle. It's still pretty early in the offseason process, but it seems like they're really tackling that right tackle position. And I think that's because they're not getting rid of Chooks. I know that's another name that people think we should cut ties with. That's silly. Chooks is so young. He's had so much experience. We haven't found how to utilize his talents yet. And I think moving him to left tackle is a safer bet than putting a rookie at left tackle. So I'm putting Darnell Wright, tackle out of Tennessee, in the second round as the right tackle. He's big, he's physical, he's incredible at the run. He still has pretty good upside in pass blocking as well. I'd say his pass blocking is even better than his run blocking. 6'6", 342 pounds. He'd probably have to lose a little bit of weight so he's not too immobile. But dude moves like a gazelle. Like as our good friend Steel Jedi would say, he moves like a fucking gazelle for someone his size and his build. And I think having him at right tackle would complete the O-line. You would have Chooks, hopefully Ben Powers, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and now Darnell Wright. And that would be an offensive line that I feel confident in for the future. I think that they really liked him in the Senior Bowl. And as much as I'd like a guy like a DeJuan Jones or a guy maybe in the first round, I just think that there might be other positions they look at before tackle. And I think somebody like Wright or even Matthew Bergeron showed really good abilities and skills in the Senior Bowl enough to warrant a draft pick here in the late second round.
Yeah, and Wright, man, I was looking at film at him for a couple weeks. It's very difficult to find any negative on him. Very difficult. And I don't know how reliable this is, but I heard reports that the Steelers could see him being moved as a guard. So I don't know where exactly he'd fit as a guard unless you move Daniels to left guard, which I don't think would be the right decision. But him at right tackle, man, and he even had a great game versus inevitable top 5 pick Will Anderson against Alabama. So I mean, the film on that speaks for itself at the caliber player Wright is. So him at right tackle, if they do want to move Chucks to left and then bring this guy in, that's a confident tackle duo. I ain't gonna lie.
Yes, it is. Very dependable. Two very good guys on both sides of the tackle positions right there. Darnell Wright, there's a lot of positive, hard to find any negative on him. You watch his tape, he's just like a brick wall at tackle.
Yeah, he is.
And that's what you need, that's what you want, that's what you would love at the tackle position. Darnell Wright, I love the pick.
Now, that'll close the second round. Let's get to the third round, man. The 80th pick, I believe the 80th pick. And our mock, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Daiyan Henley, inside linebacker out of Washington State. Now, what you said about Drew Sanders, I feel very similar to Henley, man. He's one of my favorite guys. He's one of those that are going under the radar. And I very much see a lot of Mark Robinson in him, only obviously a little bigger. Henley played wide receiver his first couple years at Nevada. He played wide receiver and then ultimately switched to defense. And then in his first and only year at Washington State, man, he absolutely broke out at inside linebacker and had a great showing at the Senior Bowl. He's very sticky, very good in coverage. He can blitz. He's fast. He's great against the run. He's almost another jack of all trades. He's one of those guys that's really going under the radar and could be an absolute late day 2 steal.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the Steelers do at inside linebacker. I absolutely agree what you said about keeping Jack. We have to. Why would you cut Jack and have zero dependability at a position that's already been so undependable for how many years now?
Yeah.
So whatever they do, they could start Robinson opposite of Jack because obviously they're very high on Robinson. They could keep Spillane. They could get someone else. They could put Henley in early or not exactly rush him and split him and Robinson and Spillane and someone else they put in. You don't exactly have to rush this guy, but he gives off Mark Robinson vibes, just a lot bigger and probably a lot better because he's much more fluid and frequent in coverage. Henley is another guy I really like, and in the third round we address inside linebacker because it is a position the Steelers must address, hopefully in free agency, but there's a lot of guys, man. Day 2, we can absolutely select at the position, man, and Henley's another one of those late-round steals, in my opinion.
Yeah, just like Drew Sanders, Henley has a lot of upside. He's one of my favorites at the inside linebacker position. He shows a lot of promise on the tape. He's got good size, 6'2", a little over 230. He was a good playmaker for Washington State on that defense. At the Senior Bowl, he stood out. He broke out. He looked real good. I'm really excited to see how he does in his pro day. At the Combine, I'm really excited about this guy in the NFL level. I think he has a ton of upside, especially if he were to become a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Agreed. I'm just very attracted by his coverage ability, and of course, the Steelers love those stories of players turn positions, like wide receiver to quarterback or vice versa, or defensive line to O-line like Villanueva, or like Mark Robinson, running back turned linebacker, and now Henley, receiver turned linebacker. I mean, Steelers love those guys. They love building guys like that. So, but what's your selection, man, in the third round?
So in the third round, I have probably the Steelers' most excited player that they found in the Senior Bowl. And it was no secret that the Steelers really liked this guy. But Keanu Benton, nose tackle out of Wisconsin, 6'4", 300-pound mauler at the inside defensive line position. I think defensive line is something that we saw very frequently last year have some hiccups. And I think that Tyson Alualu's most likely going to retire. Chris Wormley just tore and injured himself. So as unfortunate as it is, I could see them cutting Chris Wormley and wishing him the best, but he's not going to provide anything. Maybe even put him on IR if they want to be nice to him, but still, he's not going to be playing next year. You have Loudermilk, who's unproven. I know a lot of people keep saying cut Montravius Adams, but he was your starter last year, so why would you cut your starter? Montravius Adams will stay there. So Marvin Leal is not an outside linebacker. He's very much just going to be your pass rush guy. And I would love to take somebody like Siaki Ika, but Siaki Ika is so big that he's only going to come out for like 2 downs before they have to do a substitution. So I would much rather go with Keanu Benton. He's going to be there at least 3 downs at all times. You get more out of him. He's going to be that nose tackle in the middle to pair up with Cam Hayward and maybe even Larry Ogunjobi if the reports about him wanting to be signed by the Steelers are true. I think Keanu Benton would be a fabulous guy in the 3rd round that you could pick up because he provides you with so much oomph at so late in the draft. Like the fact that you could get this guy in the 3rd round is a steal.
Agreed. It's great value. It is, like you said, it's an absolute steal. This guy reminds me a lot of Javon Hargrave. I'm not going to lie to you.
He is very Hargrave-esque, who I believe also was took in the 3rd round.
He was.
And the one thing that we haven't really talked about yet is the Andy Weidel factor. I'm not saying that this guy is going to completely take over the draft room. It's still Omar Khan and Mr. Rooney's to own and to figure out, and Mike Tomlin as well. But don't think for a second that Andy Weidel's not going to have his footprint or his handprints all over this draft. If anybody knows how to draft O-line and D-line prospects, and you can take a look at what Andy Weidel has done in the Super Bowl highlights we just saw a few weeks ago, that is what Andy Weidel can do for your team. That's the type of team and the kind of roster he can build for you. So I could definitely see him pulling a rabbit out of the hat with a guy like Benton in the 3rd.
Agreed. And honestly, man, if the Steelers want to wait for certain positions, if they want to prioritize certain positions over others, or they want to wait on certain positions because of the value, because of how deep it is, like inside interior defensive line, you could literally wait to the 3rd round and get someone like Benton or get so many other guys, man. It's so stacked. Waddle's one of those guys, he's going to find someone late, man, and we're going to get someone that could start. Maybe not immediately, but he's going to have an impact. So
yeah, Weidel has a strong eye for talent. He was a big reason for making that draft board for Philadelphia, and there's a reason why they brought him into this team as the Steelers' first ever assistant general manager in team history. I feel like Weidel is definitely going to have a lot of input.
Agreed.
I think we all think.
I hope the Steelers listen to him, man. Moving on to the 4th round. Now, you addressed the corner with your 3rd pick in this mock. We waited to the 4th round. I don't know what they do at corner. We all agree that we hope Sutton's back. We trust Wallace. That doesn't exactly complete corner. We could still use depth. We could still use another dependable starting backup, which you could say is Pierre if they want to bring him back, if they want to keep Witherspoon. Time will tell. But for depth purposes, and I just really like this guy's potential, it's unfortunate that he suffered so many injuries in college. It's been so injury-plagued for him, but when he plays, man, he absolutely plays. Noah Daniels, cornerback out of TCU. His injuries worry me, I'm not going to lie to you, but the guy can play. The guy has boatloads of potential, man. So for depth purposes, for special teams-wise, he'd come in first, but I think this guy could climb the depth ladder pretty quickly. God forbid he stays healthy. So I like Daniels a lot. He's sticky. He's very good in coverage. Not a massive turnover guy. He's a very solid run tackler as well. So he's nothing crazy. He's nothing flashy. He's not going to be the most explosive corner coming out of this class, but he's someone that is very dependable, very James Pierre-esque. So I think Daniels in the 4th round, if he stays healthy, could be a very nice mid-round pick for years to come, for depth purposes and just for reliability.
Yeah, for sure. If the Steelers ever want to explore the option to change up the depth at cornerback, bring a fresh face, bring some upside in there, Noah Daniels is definitely a name that they could bring in.
Yeah.
The upside's there.
Now, 4th round pick for you. What you got, man?
I got big Zach Harrison from the Ohio State. Zach Harrison was somebody that I was thinking would go ahead and prepare and declare for the draft last year. And so I was really excited about him last year. But I think his draft stock had fallen and he decided to go back to school this year. And watching him this year even more closely as someone that I wanted previously, it was confirmed that I really, really like this guy. He's like 6'5", 6'6", 280 pounds. He can kind of play this hybrid outside linebacker, defensive end position, whether or not they wanted to put his hands in the dirt or not. He's going to run probably in the late 4.4s, 4.5s, even though numbers aren't everything. And he's somebody that I think would provide wonderful support as that outside linebacker 3. Now, remember, I already have Drew Sanders kind of being this like extra pass rushing option, but Zach Harrison can provide you a lot in the run defense as well. He's a big body, very long arms, very rangy guy, very explosive. He isn't perfect. He definitely has some focus issues. He definitely misses a lot of times when he could finish his runs at the quarterback. But I think that just him being in Ohio State for so long and just having Ohio State's linebacking guru, he's kind of like the linebacker whisperer, and knowing that this guy is a prospect from that team, I think would be really, really good for the Steelers. And to be honest with you, he kind of reminds me of what Quincy Roche was thinking about bringing to this team. And oddly enough, they brought Quincy Roche back. He's kind of this bigger prospect that has a lot of power and explosiveness, but he's just not quite as polished, which is why we find him in the 4th round here.
Yeah, I think that's great value, man. Harrison was one of my immediate favorites when it came to edge depth when the draft process first started. He's one of the guys that really stuck out to me. I think there was a lot of weight on his shoulders at Ohio State when Chase Young left and Sam Hubbard and Nick Bosa, but he still had good draft production, or he still had good college production when he played. And I think as edge depth, which is sorely needed because we saw when Watt was out, Reed didn't do anything. Our depth was bare. I'm glad we brought Roche back. I'm excited to see hopefully his second time around could be here for the long run. But to bring in an extra guy like Harrison from a school like Ohio State, yeah, I like the pick a lot. I like the build on edge depth, which is what we do in the 7th round, man. Unfortunately, we have to wait all the way to the 7th round after the 4th round, but that's what we do in the 7th round with the first pick. We go Ali Gay, edge out of LSU, another big body, 6'6", 265, something like that, big guy. Again, not a lot of college production out of him, but he's speedy, he's lengthy, he's big. He can blow up the run. He can get to the quarterback because of his speed, because of his size. I like this guy's potential and even his story, man. Coming from, I think it was a country in South Africa and playing football. That story like that is really cool, and the Steelers are attracted to stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So him in the 7th round would be a pretty good pick. Edge depth, which is what we really need.
So our edge depth it's been bare, but now it's really bare, depending on if we bring Reed or Jones back. But I don't know if they do that, considering how unreliable and undependable they have been. The edge depth is not good.
Right. So we definitely need to address edge. You addressed in the 4th. We waited all the way to the 7th. Hopefully, with some moves in free agency, the Steelers can add flexibility and take edge maybe a little sooner. Or maybe even they pick up an edge guy in free agency. Who knows? We'll see. But in the 7th round, we address edge. And I think Ali Gay could be one of those guys that could fill in that gap pretty nicely.
So the 7th round is like undrafted free agents that you don't want to have to hit the open market. These are pretty much special teams, practice squad, late depth round players. So I have the Steelers taking Trey Dean III, safety, defensive back out of Florida, because I don't think they're going to be able to sign Cam Sutton, Edmonds, and KZ. I think they'll be able to do 2 of the 3, and the third one's got to go. I don't know if they're going to keep Edmonds or KZ. I would assume it would be Edmonds just because they drafted him, and they kept him around last year, which tells me there was something about him they liked. I don't think KZ has done enough to make him stay over Edmonds. Edmonds has also been one of the healthiest players on the Steelers. Like, knock on wood, dude's never had any bad problems. That being said, you're going to need somebody to be this third roaming safety that KZ was, right? someone who's going to be able to be the blanket out there in the backfield, because Minka's been playing a lot more down in the box lately. So he'll play down in the box, which means Trey Dean and Edmonds will have to play out, or vice versa. Edmonds is down and Minka and Trey Dean need to be out there. And he's got speed. He's got the quickness to defend those slot receivers when he's kind of that blanket, that third safety that stays closer to the box. He's very physical. If you've ever seen any of his tape, you're going to see immediately right off the bat, he's a very physical guy. He's good in the run game, so he can be that extra guy to be that downhill tackler. But he definitely has, a lot of things that need polishing up. He slips on tackles every now and again. You'll notice on his tape, he slips on the tackle. Sometimes he's a little too wily. He's a little too out of control, and he needs some refinement, which I think is like Mike Tomlin's hidden speciality is taking these very raw players and giving them focus. So I think Florida players like Dean, even when we took Roche out of Miami, I think that they're a little raw, but I think that their upside could be something. And again, worst case scenario, he's a really quality depth guy or a practice squad guy, but it's the 7th round, so nothing here is that pressing.
No, but I feel like we can get a very much of a Trey Norwood story out of this guy. Only obviously a lot more versatile.
Yeah, because Norwood, he's been quite underwhelming. Now, I feel like he's more of a nickel corner kind of guy. I don't think he's really a pure safety, but, in games and in roles that he has to step in, he's been quite, granted, he's a 7th round pick. What do you expect a guy like him to do, being selected in the 7th round? But Norwood did have that Swiss Army knife, like Tomlin called him when he announced his selection. He hasn't really showcased that. He hasn't really done that. I feel like bringing a guy like Dean, brings more competition, could, better both of them if need be.
And like Sentinel said, he could take that Casey role or even a Carl Joseph role if they don't bring him back. So yeah. I like the addition. I like the extra depth. And just, throw another guy out there throwing some competition for the training camp.
Exactly.
Now, to close out the 7th round. Now, we both have similar picks but different players, which I see. And we're going to have another video on this out later this week because it is a position that the Steelers are going to have to focus on. It's something going under the radar. It's honestly one of the more important ones, if you ask me, because we only have 2 guys under contract at this position. One might be cut to save $8 million. He might take a restructure. He might ask for his release. I don't know what the future is for Mitch. I don't know what the future is for the backup quarterback position. What I do know is I think the Steelers are going to select one at some point, and they might do it very similar to what they did with Oladukin last year, only actually give this guy an opportunity this time around. In the 7th round, we take Jaron Hall, quarterback out of BYU. We need a quarterback, whether that's a backup, a third guy, probably a third guy. I just don't see the Steelers going into the draft without a primary backup quarterback.
Yeah.
But to add in an extra guy for depth as a 3rd or 4th guy for training camp, the Steelers like to have at least 3 or 4 by training camp. So bringing in someone via the draft is probably very likely, especially if the Steelers add a lot of flexibility via free agency. So that's going to allow them to select a position like quarterback in Jaron Hall. I really like his arm talent. Very accurate. He's pretty mobile, not afraid to run out the pocket and use his mobility. And honestly, man, he kind of gives Brock Purdy vibes. I'm not going to lie.
But he's a guy that's pretty safe with the ball, doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He's got a good arm, decent accuracy. He got a lot of stats in college. He's very progressive, especially in this final year in BYU. To get a guy as of right now to be the number 3 potentially, have him maybe red shirt, if you wanted to. If you do keep Mitch, restructure Mitch or whatever, and maybe have him groom and develop and maybe end up being the 2nd quarterback behind Pickett in the near future, it's a possibility. And Jaron Hall, he's got some upside to get back up.
There's actually a few quarterbacks in the late rounds that I could see the Steelers selecting, man. And you selected one of them to close your mock out.
Absolutely. So I think a quarterback who has steadily made his entire team and program better, and that's what you want to see out of a guy who's going to be a backup. Someone, or any quarterback for that matter, someone who elevates the people around you. And that's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR, quarterback out of UCLA. This is someone who has taken a no-name UCLA team and has steadily made them more and more and more competitive and more relevant. He kind of reminds me of like a Tyler Huntley, and that's why I take him. I want somebody mobile like him. I want somebody who has brought up the people around him and who could fight for that quarterback 3 or that protected cornerback on the practice squad position. I mean, just listen to these numbers. He threw 27 touchdowns last year. Before that was 21. Before that was 12. So every year he's getting better. He has thrown only like 10 interceptions, 6 interceptions, 4 interceptions. So he's accurate. He's had a rating of 150 or more all 3 years. He's been really the main guy at UCLA. And again, he's someone who I think could be a serviceable backup. I think he's someone who can provide that kind of Malik Willis kind of, mobility and potential and body control and size to maybe what they were looking at last year before they took Pickett. And again, I just like the way he's made his team a little bit better each year. No one was talking about UCLA, and then this kid just slowly but surely started making the team better and better and better, and I just love the way he pops on film.
Yeah, I really like his style, man. He's a dual threat, which is obviously, it's a good trait for a backup. And honestly, that could be very helpful when it comes to, obviously, since we don't know the future of Lamar Jackson, but for instance, for any mobile quarterback we face, the Steelers love to bring in guys to play that mobile quarterback role. I mean, they did it with, I think they did it with Mitch last year when we had to face Taysom Hill. So they like to do that extra scouting. So bringing in someone like Robinson would be an add-on for that. But I agree completely on what you said about DTR. Tyler Huntley's a great comp. I really see that. I also see a very more athletic Josh Dobbs in him, man. He's just he's a good guy, man. He's a good football player, and I think as a backup, as depth initially, man, would just be it's what we need. It's something that we absolutely need to address is the backup quarterback position, whether that's primary behind Kenny or just as a third guy or just competition. I like the way we close it out. Similar positions, different players. Pretty much same vocal points. So this was a great collab, man. This is great that we shared mocks and split opinions and just shared different viewpoints. Very similar closings, but very different beginnings, which is good, man. We're looking at all aspects. This is obviously all pre-free agency, so anything could change. We actually hope a lot changes so we can add extra players ahead of others or other positions ahead of others. So time will tell for that, man. Free agency can't get here any sooner, but for our first mock, man, I think it was a success. I think it's a good one, and very glad you could join us, man. Very good mock by yourself.
Thank you very much. This is one of the most enjoyable and fun times of the year, and so let's just enjoy it as much as we can because I love the football season. I love the NFL. I love when September rolls around and we're hearing that NFL music for the first time before we watch our new players get on the field. But there's something just about free agency and off season and the draft and combine that's just so exciting. So enjoy it while you can.
Absolutely, man. And unfortunately, man, just like the NFL season, it'll be gone before you even know it. So the draft process is always fun, man, and there's only a lot more players we're going to be able to get to see and scout and view and just look at and potentially even mock, man. And as pro days, as the combine, as everything comes closer, we'll see what the Steelers do, and it's going to be fun, man. So I'm glad that that it's all finally here. We can get a lot of fun theories out there, a lot of fun speculation and everything. So this is a fun time, man. So again, thank you for joining us again for another year with another great mock, man. For our first one, glad to have you on, and possibly get another one down the road for sure.
Absolutely. You guys just give me a call whenever you want to collab again, and we'll get to it.
Absolutely, brother. Otherwise, man, you're more welcome to join us with the peace outro. Rob, sign us out.
Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you later. Peace!